welcome to Food, Feels, and Banana Peels. I'm your host, Laura Pifer. Thanks for joining me. This podcast is all about providing a different perspective on health and disease for you to consider. It's about inspiring you to take control of your own health, advocate for yourself, and be curious about how you can support yourself holistically and naturally so you can live each day happier and healthier than the last. Hey, we are speaking with Lisa Roers. Lisa is joining us to tell her story of health and disease from Minnesota and share with us some insights that she has found have helped her to regain health on her journey. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. It's really a privilege to see you and nice to chat with you again.
Always. It's really exciting to have you here because last time we chatted, it was me chatting with you about my story. So I'm really happy and honored for you to now be sharing your story with us. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, let's go way back. Now, I was born in Minnesota and raised here. I've lived in multiple other places around the world. Actually, I lived in Spain. I lived in southern United States and the eastern coast as well. I had the privilege of living in a lot of different places, but I always end up coming back to Minnesota. And I'm a mom, I'm a wife. We've got one kid who's about almost 14 and a half here now. Just a wonderful young man. And yeah, and I've been in the corporate world for 26 years or so, serving clients with executive coaching and things like that. But my life took a turn about 7 years ago now, which kind of changed my focus and changed some of my passions. And so now, instead of doing the enterprise coaching work that I was doing before, I'm doing some one-on-one wellness coaching. And some of that stems from my story, which I think we'll get into a little later.
A huge shift for you, and not unlike many of the people that I'm speaking to, including myself and my own health journey. Something happened, shifted, changed your perception, your trajectory, and you land in a new space.
Exactly. That's so
So
true.
let's get into your journey, Lisa.
Okay. So, I've always been one of those a little bit type A, always pushing and working as hard as I can, kind of pushing to have my career and pushing hard to succeed as much as I can. And I was in sales for 15 years. So I, had the quotas and had all the sales calls and did a lot of the travel and all of that. And my sales career kind of pivoted into a executive coaching career and loved that. I loved what I was doing. But then when I got married to my sweetheart and we had a little one, I really wanted to pour into my family. I wanted to be the best wife and the best mother I could be. So I had the opportunity to take 8 of those years off and just be home with my family, which was just a gift, such a gift. I don't regret any minute of that. So then I went back to work about 7 years ago. And just before I went back to work, I had woke up one morning and everything was like totally normal, fine. And I just couldn't move. And I really thought, Laura, that it was kind of those mornings where you wake up and you just have like a crook in your neck and you think, oh gosh, that was a bad night's rest. That's what I
Yes.
thought it was when I first kind of surfaced. And I should maybe pause and back up. We grew up really, really poor. We lived on food stamps here in the US, and my mom was disabled, so she wasn't working, so she was on government supported income that way. And my parents got divorced when I was really young. So my dad wasn't around to support us with extra things as well. So we ate really cheaply, the cheapest boxed things that you could possibly encounter. And I decided to go back and tell you that because I think some of that plays into my story. So we ate a lot of boxed foods, a lot of canned foods, I didn't really even know what a vegetable and a fruit was or a carb and a protein until I got into college. So, and I think some of those bad habits that I started way back then came back to haunt me about 7 years ago when I woke up that morning and couldn't move my neck. I didn't know that then. This is all hindsight, obviously, now, which is the case for most of us, right? We just live our lives until something happens, and then we're kind of forced to pause and look back and go, whoa, what just happened? So, back to that morning where I woke up and I couldn't really move, I really attributed it to a bad night's rest. So, I proceeded in every single night of that week to try every possible bed and couch and floor and whatever surface I could sleep on to see if I would get a better night's sleep, which I didn't. In fact, it just got worse. And the pain spread kind of from the back of my neck down my back. And for the longest time, I couldn't sneeze, those muscles that are right behind our rib cage. I had so much inflammation in the back of my rib cage area. Then it moved down to my hips and then into my knees. And then in short order, I wasn't able to even walk.
Wow.
I could hobble around a little bit. I couldn't do stairs at all. Our bedrooms are up a flight of stairs. So I literally would sit down at the top of the stairs and slowly slide down because I could not do stairs. I had so much inflammation in my knees and my hips. And that began my journey to understand or try to figure out. I've always been very curious about research anyway. So I just started diving into it. What could be causing this? What could be causing this? Now, I mentioned earlier that my mom had a disability and she had multiple sclerosis. I had been her caregiver already for a couple of decades. So I was very familiar with MS and I knew this was not that. But inflammation and autoimmune diseases are all related. So it's not surprising now in hindsight that my body got hit by something. But again, I had no understanding at that point what it was. I went to doctor upon doctor. I started with Western medicine doctors, just your typical go to your general practitioner and see if they can run some tests. And my inflammation markers were off the charts, but everything else was normal. So I'd go see a specialist and I'd go see another doctor. And this was so that morning that I woke up was in February when I had all the pain. And so progressing through toward the summertime, it was about June when I really was having some problems walking at that point. I got a opportunity to go down to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which is one of the most highly acclaimed clinics in the world, really. But my appointment wasn't until the end of January. So I had to wait 6 months with this pain and all of this other stuff. But my mind kept thinking, okay, January, I'm going to see a bunch of doctors. They're going to tell me what's wrong. So I worked with some functional med doctors. I did some supplements and things like that in the interim, but had very little luck getting any kind of break from the pain. So January came, and wouldn't you know it, we're in one of those years right now where everybody's having such a warm winter right now. But this particular January was the coldest January on record, I think, in Minnesota. I went down to the Mayo Clinic. It was negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is cold.
Absolutely super cold. And by the grace of God, I happened to get a hotel room that had indoor parking, heated parking, which my car never would have started the next day if I had left it out not heated. So it was definitely a provision. But over those 3 days, I saw 18 doctors. I had 33 vials of blood pulled. I had every possible test done. I had biopsies and you name it, because I've got some marks on my legs as well. And I saw infectious disease. I saw dermatology. I saw internal medicine, you name it. Nobody knows what's going on in my body. No answers. So the
Okay.
6 months that led up to that, where you're just anticipating and you're just, okay, everything's going to make sense in January. No answers. Their best guess was some type of vasculitis, which is where
Okay.
your body is, rejecting your own blood vessels, which is lovely. By the way, don't Google that because it's not a very happy prognosis. But there's various forms of it. And obviously, if your body starts rejecting your internal organs, which have blood vessels, that's a really bad story. But my body was rejecting more of my extremities and the blood vessels there. They didn't have any answers for me. They tried putting me on a bunch of medicine. They tried giving me injections, which I just absolutely hate those kinds of injections. They gave me a ton of steroids. It's just all kinds of different modalities that they tried and nothing worked.
So I have some
Yeah.
questions because A
The
big
journey.
story. That's a big journey just up to this point.
After that, I got ulcers in my on my legs, and I got an ulcer on my hand that completely opened up my hand, like just out of the blue. If you've never had an ulcer on your hand, it's just your skin gets attacked, and you're basically from the hole from my thumb all the way around my palm of my hand to my finger, the whole thing just opened up. I mean, I literally had to wear a gauze and a wrap on it for about 3 months before that thing healed. So all of this happening, it was obvious something was wrong, but nobody in our current modalities of medicine was able to tell me what was wrong or what to do. So I was really forced to dive into some research. So
I have so many questions for you up to that point because,
yeah.
you so eloquently spoke about moving through this
Mhm.
year and a half of your life, was it?
It was a couple years for
Couple of
sure.
years of your life that were likely elicited a lot of different things for you. We haven't talked about thoughts and emotions, and I'm also wondering, was there something in your life that was going on that point in February that you can recall? Had you been caregiving for your mom for many, many years at that point, or was there anything trigger wise that you can recall?
Great question, Laura. And you know what? No. The answer is no. I've asked that question and rehashed that so many times. I made, oh my goodness, the work that I did. I went through the whole history of my life, starting from the earliest memory that even my mother had given me, the earliest memories of my health history, and anything that had come into my life, anything that any drug I had taken, anytime I had, been on an antibiotic, gotten a bronchitis, whatever it might be, I did this whole history to try to figure out what kinds of things might be contributing to this. And no, I have an amazing husband. He's completely supportive and wonderfully helpful. I have an amazing son. The only trigger that maybe I have come to after looking at all the things that I've been on, and maybe did I take something 10 years ago that has surfaced now? You know, was there any vaccinations that I've had that maybe caused some reaction? No, none of that. Because this happened 2017 is when it first surfaced. So from 2017 to 2019 were the 2 years that I was really attacked and basically unable to walk, and started working from home even before everybody else started working from home. But this is a new house that we were living in, and there was a little bit of mold.
Mm-hmm.
So mold might have been a trigger or part of it, but the real answer is there was not one trigger, and there never
Right.
is. Our immune systems take on a load, and it's disease comes to us like a storm. It's not all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's lightning. No, first you see clouds, and then you've got, a little bit more humidity, then you get a little bit more wind, and then you get a little bit of rain, and then all of a sudden the hurricane hits. You get all of this combination of symptoms. And it's the same with illnesses. You get this combination of influences that create this dis-ease. And while the mold might have been that straw that broke the camel's back,
Mm-hmm.
it for sure wasn't the thing. And I did seal up the areas that I thought were potentially causing issue. And so that was one thing we could talk about that as well, but because that is one thing we have to check our homes for. But now that other triggers, I don't know. I don't know of any other ones.
You said it so well in that when we look at implements of disease, it's generally not just one thing. There's usually some sort of catalyst. We say in holistic health, the immune system is like a bucket. Everyone has their own size bucket, and your
Mhm.
bucket and my bucket are likely different. And we don't know how much our buckets can handle until our buckets begin to overflow. Toxins
Mhm.
come to us from many different forms. They come to us from environmental toxins, toxins
Mhm.
that we're ingesting in our foods, toxins in our water, toxins from emotions, toxins from thoughts. When we have toxic emotion and thoughts, that filled my bucket so
Mhm.
quickly. And then eventually there becomes a time whereby your bucket is full. And no matter what you do, that disease is beginning to manifest. For many of us, it comes on fast. And maybe in hindsight, there were signs and symptoms a little bit, but type A, like myself too, you just kind of plow through it. You just
Well,
keep
and you
going.
kind of have to because your body, I mean, how many days do we wake up, we feel tired? Well, it was because of sleep. There's just so many contributing
Hmm.
factors, right? So you really have to kind of just press on. But one of the key learnings that I've had through this whole journey, Laura, is really understanding how to listen to my body and
Hmm.
what my body is saying. I love your analogy of the bucket. Another one, if someone needs another example, I want your listeners to imagine just starting to tap on your forearm. Tap, I mean, like hard. And then imagine you're tapping with a screwdriver. Okay, your skin's going to be able to endure that for a while, but at some point, that's going to break through. That's when disease hits. Like your body can handle some of that beating for a while, but there's a point where it's going to break through. And listening to our bodies and starting to pay attention to, okay, now I'm not sleeping well and these other things are happening. Okay, when you start getting those load of different factors that your body's speaking to you and telling you, hello, I need some help, that's when you got to start taking action. Extra weight is my body telling me I need to take attention to my body. No, it's not okay to be 50 pounds overweight. And that's just embrace that. I'm sorry, that's not healthy for our body.
Hmm.
It's not healthy for the inside of our body. Take vanity off the table. It's just not a healthy place to be to have that much extra weight on your frame. And of course, your joints are going to be tired. You're carrying extra 50 pounds. It's not happy. Same with, your skin tells you a story about what's happening on the inside of your body, the brightness of your eyes, the dryness of your eyes, your fingernails. Oh, there's so many, the dryness of your hair, all the different things that our bodies can tell us.
Hmm.
And I never learned that language. Nobody taught me that language
Hmm.
until I really had to
Till
pay
you had
attention
to.
and figure it
Hmm.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's often what happens, unfortunately, and why on food feels and banana peels, I'm really trying to bring awareness to people that, hey, let's help you based on all of these wonderful humans that I'm talking to, based on our experience, to say it's time for you to notice what is going on and really become aware of your own body before you're telling a story like we are.
Right. It's
Hopefully we
so
can
true.
save you, those years of turmoil by helping to provide you some information proactively.
Exactly. Exactly.
Before we continue on from the Mayo Clinic, you've spent now a couple of years trying to find some sort of probably diagnosis and solution, and you're kind of going in circles. How are you feeling mentally, emotionally? How's your energy? Like, how are all of these things? Because they all play a role in what's going on within your body.
At that point, I was super grateful that I was in the type of career that I could work from home. I was enterprise coach working with teams all over the world, but most of my work was over Zoom anyway. And so my request to my manager at that time to work from home was like a no-brainer. It's like I drove into the office and got on a computer and then spoke to people all over the world. There wasn't any need for me to be driving into the office when I couldn't walk into the office once I got there. So that was easy. I was very grateful. Actually, most of my story emotionally is through the filter of gratitude. I have so much gratitude, gratitude that I had the faculties that I did, gratitude that had been a caregiver for my mom for 20 years. So I knew a little bit of the industry and how to navigate some of that. And by the way, had an extra walker sitting in my living room that I could use to move because I couldn't move otherwise. So there was so many things that I chose to look at from the perspective of gratitude. Was I frustrated? Yes. But I also knew that eventually I'd figure it out. I just knew I'm going to figure it out eventually. And I did eventually. But I had to fire Western medicine. I literally fired Western medicine in the process. After I got back from the Mayo Clinic, I had gone through numerous other doctors. I think I stopped counting at 32 different doctors that I had seen. And I was sitting in his office and telling him my this was a chiropractic kind of office, I think, at the time. And I was telling him my ailments and the things that I was having issues with. And I had found a online, these was one of those things, one of those advertisements that pops up that you're absolutely sure is a scam. Well, I had clicked on it and I listened to I had did so many of those and listened to the case studies and listened to the resources and listened to the logic and looked at the ingredients and decided to buy this one thing that they were trying to sell me. And it was a proteolytic enzyme. And I started taking it little by little, one pill, two pill, three pills, 3 times a day, 3 pills of this supplement. And holy cats, I could walk. Wow. All of a sudden I could do stairs. I mean, it took a couple of months, but this proteolytic enzyme was like gave me like life back. I was like, okay, I found something that's going to help me bridge this gap and get well again. And when I went to this one doctor's office and I was telling him everything, and I asked him, I said, "Do you know what a proteolytic enzyme is?" And he said, "No. Can you spell that for me?" And I said, I sat there in that whole office appointment, but I was educating him on food and nutrition and what proteolytic enzymes can do for the body, and especially for inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do it. I really didn't want a diagnosis. In the end, Laura, I'm super grateful I didn't get a solid diagnosis. I don't want a label. I don't want to be labeled.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just get to the source and reverse it. And so
Yes.
that's what I'm focused on.
Yes.
I don't need a label. I don't need a medicine. My body is not sick because I have a shortage of Humira in my system. My body's not sick because I have a shortage of some other injectable or steroid. No, my body's sick because there's either deficit of nutrition or an overload of toxic.
There will be a lot of people who aren't necessarily as familiar with the digestive process and how this works.
Well, yeah. And while I do still take them, they're enzymes that we just don't get from our food, and we don't get in the quantity that we should get them. And that's one thing that your listeners should really understand is, even if you're eating really, really well, people ask me all the time, should I do supplements? Well, yes, we kind of need to these days, because even if you're eating really, really well, our food does not have the same nutrient content that it used to have. A lot of the fish these days, which are farmed, are all fed corn. Well, how many fish in the wild go munch on corn stalks? None of them. Their bodies weren't meant for that any more than ours were meant for it, as much as we are eating it. So the nutrition obviously is going to be different in that fish if what they eat is different.
Right.
Same with cows. Cows are meant to eat grass. That's what they were genetically designed for. If you pump their bodies full of corn, their body's not going to make the same kind of nutrients that they were going to make if they took the sun-enriched grass from the ground. So all these different things, just 2 examples, but even the non-animal protein kind of things, the nutrients are different. We're overworking the soil. You're supposed to switch the fields and plant different things in them, and we just don't do those kinds of things anymore.
That's
so
right.
Proteolytic enzymes, great for inflammation. I highly recommend just researching and learning about it. And they're low risk. So they're things that could really help somebody without the risk of, the side effects that some of the medications can give us.
In speaking to some of those things that you just brought up, which is like a perfect segue, our bodies naturally produce certain enzymes. And so there are enzymes that we will derive from food when food is grown properly in the proper environment, right? With a proper complement of 16 minerals in the soil. And many foods that we now find are mass produced are grown with 3 minerals: nitrogen, potassium, and PK. So 3 of them. And so we get these nice leaves, the plant looks nice, they get a dense root system, but the food is devoid of nutrients. So what happens exactly?
Beautiful box, but there's nothing in it.
What happens then is we take that and we put that into our bodies, and our bodies are saying, okay, in order to make this enzyme and this enzyme, which are required for digestion, we need these minerals in order for these vitamins, these minerals, because the body is a very, very complex environment that works very intricately, one system with the other system. So when we don't have all of the vitamins and minerals that we need in order to produce these enzymes, because the food no longer contains them, or the food no longer is producing a naturally derived enzyme for us to use to break it down, then what happens is our body can't properly break down a food. Our body can't properly break down the food. The food becomes no longer useful to us, and causes and stimulates inflammatory processes in our bodies.
Yes. And so, in addition to that, the food that would have had nutrients in it. We can't unpack that box of nutrients and use it in our bodies because we don't have the key, if you want to even use like an analogy of a key and a lock. The enzyme is the key that opens up the box of nutrients. And
Correct.
if we don't have the right enzyme, we don't have the right key. So then basically we just pass that food right through our system. We end up being overfed and undernourished.
Yes, we are the most overfed, undernourished population in history. When we talk about inflammatory diseases have been on the rise for many, many years. And a big contributor to that is what you were talking about with feeding corn and other genetically modified ingredients to the animals. We have bioaccumulation in the food chain. And so not only are we taking on the toxins that we're eating in the food when we say eat that organism, we are also taking on foods that are not genetically made in alignment with the earth, and our body is made to break down foods that are derived from the earth. So we're taking almost like a synthetic lab-made food, if you will, because we've messed with the genetic properties of it, and we've said, okay, body, go ahead and digest it. Inflammatory disease in animals is super, super prevalent. I remember doing research when I was in school and seeing how cows and pigs and all of these animals that were being fed these foods, levels of inflammatory bowel disease was so high. And what are we seeing in our population right now more than anything is inflammatory bowel disease. And we're calling it IBS. It's like an idiopathic thing that they say in a lot of times in Western medicine, oh, it's idiopathic. We don't really know where the origin is. It can be anything from diarrhea to constipation, to pain, to all of these different categories and symptoms. And they've just kind of put it in this category and said, oh, you have IBS. Okay, let's try this med. Let's try that med.
This medicine. Yeah, exactly.
Let's keep moving forward. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's so, so important to know where your food is coming from, what your food is being fed, how your food is being treated if you're eating meat. All of these things have direct impacts. Some people may not necessarily be familiar with this, but energetically on our bodies, physically and energetically.
Exactly. You earlier in our conversation, Laura, you mentioned about how toxic thoughts and lack of forgiveness and stress affects our bodies and our health. Okay, I am absolutely I'm not vegan, but I am really, really against poor treatment of animals that are as a gift giving us their lives so we can eat their wonderful muscle and that protein. I mean, that's a gift. And we should be treating them really well. So if that kind of stress is causing that kind of illness in our bodies, do we think it would be different for a cow or a chicken or other animals who are really treated poorly? They're also experiencing that kind of stress and high cortisol levels and all that other stuff. And then where's that stuff going? Right into the meat. Where's the meat going? Right into us.
You got
and no
it.
wonder. It's like it is the circle of life. And yes, if you don't treat the circle well, you're going to have issues. It just is not, it's a no-brainer to me.
Yes, absolutely. And for some of us, and unless we actually actively seek this information, it's going to be something that comes to us because we end up in a disease state.
Right. And we have got to start. This is one of my big, big things. We have got to start taking control and being a self-advocate for our own health. We have to stop just bowing down at the doctor's door and following like the little sheep, following the shepherd and just doing whatever they tell us to. Often their advice is wonderful. I don't mean to put a bad rap on doctors. Doctors are amazing. And a lot of them, most of them are in it because they want to help, but nobody knows your body better than you. Nobody knows your history better than you. And the 15, 20 minutes that you get with that doctor, he's going to try to find a pattern, he or she going to try to find a pattern to put you in the bucket that he can diagnose, or they can diagnose something so they can give you a drug that will help the symptom. But they are not in the business, because this isn't how they're trained. They're just not trained to find that root cause. And how could they? There's no way that a doctor could spend the years of time that I spent researching all of my bodily issues and finding the solution. So I had to step up and be a self-advocate to really get to the core reason that my body was sick.
Yes, Lisa, that is So important, advocating for ourselves and understanding
Mhm.
that we are actually responsible for ourselves, not taking and handing the reins over to someone else and saying, here, fix me. What can you do to
Right.
fix me? It's really about taking responsibility and accountability for our own health and how we've landed in the space that we are, and
Hmm.
then deciding based on our own wants, needs, where and how we want to move forward and what direction we're going to take. Gone
Exactly.
are the days of bowing at the feet of a doctor and saying, okay, fix me, because now we know that these fixes, which are essentially band-aids that are hiding the root cause, are actually, these medications are causing so many more symptoms for people. It's
Yes.
interesting because I will soon air the episode. I did a really great interview with a local medical doctor.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful.
yeah, it's going to air soon. And it was great because he explained essentially that he has a lot of knowledge of disease. He knows
Yes,
about disease and how to treat
absolutely.
disease,
Yeah.
but he does not have a lot of knowledge of health. And this is where I feel so strongly that we need to advocate for ourselves, and we also need to find alternative medicines to Western medicine that help to support us in health.
Yeah.
Taking a preventative approach, educating ourselves, can really help us in the long run, us, our children, our
Mhm.
grandchildren, in order to live happier and healthier lives and not have to get into this extreme disease state in order to find the root causes of what's going
Right.
on.
Right. And let's just say, state the obvious. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how great you are in your career. It doesn't matter how many dreams you chase. If you can't get up off the couch and walk over to the kitchen, none of it's worthwhile. Your health is everything.
Yes.
And doctors, there are really amazing doctors out there who, in those acute situations where you really need help immediately, you got a burst
Mhm.
appendix, rather, you got a broken arm, you got something, or even just like some of these chronic diseases where you need help immediately. They're
Mhm.
wonderful at that.
Right.
But to your point, they're just not in the business of curing things long term.
Yeah. And for myself, Western medicine saved my life twice. I had some very severe acute illnesses that I,
Right.
to this day, know that without Western medicine, without
Exactly.
antibiotics, there's no way that I would be here. However, I credit
Absolutely.
Western medicine for saving my life, but I credit holistic medicine for helping me live healthy
Hmm.
onward. We talk about that in the episode as well. And the beautiful thing about this MD that I'm talking to is he recognizes that there are other implements to health other than we're not just a physical body. He is very focused in his practice on the mind aspect and how the mind has a lot of influence on the body itself.
It
And
does.
we're seeing so much mental illness these days. And a huge part of his practice is mental illness. And he talks about people come in and, they just want more medication and it's causing
Yeah.
another symptom. And he'll say, well, if you get off that medication, that symptom is going to go away. So you need to look at other avenues that are going to help you come to
Mhm.
the root of this issue, not necessarily using the band-aid all the time. We need
Totally.
more practitioners like that and the
Yep.
ability for practitioners to work together. And in Canada, the
Yeah.
health system is different than in the States. We have essentially socialized medicine, and socialized medicine only recognizes some modalities of health. So
Mm.
it says, okay, you can go see your doctor 17 million times. You can go to the ER all the time. We're going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for that, but you can't go see a naturopathic doctor and we'll pay for it.
Yeah, we
So
have the same thing with our insurances. Same
right. And
thing.
it's such a barrier because why are they willing to spend so much money, time, effort, resources on one side, but they could probably spend a quarter of it on the other side?
Well, there is a reason for that. One
Yeah.
gentleman that I interviewed said it so well. He said, people think the healthcare system in America is broken. It's not broken. It's working perfectly as designed
Yes,
for the people who are making the money from the system.
that is correct. And,
Yeah.
and it is just yet another system that is derived from archaic points of view that no longer serve the population
Right.
of the people living on Earth right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so wow, that took a little bit of a deviation. But it's beautiful because I think those are things that I would like people
Yeah.
to contemplate other
Yeah.
perspectives. When we're not shown other perspectives, then we just kind of continue to go
Oh,
along.
I want to hear everything and everyone who disagrees with me. I really do, because I might be wrong. And I want
Sure.
to hear their perspective. And, it's like iron sharpens iron. So one perspective sharpens another. I love hearing the different thoughts. So, okay. So bringing us
So,
back to on track,
yeah,
right?
yes, take us back now. So, we left at you completed your time at the Mayo Clinic and you didn't have a lot of help. You came home, you began to take enzymes.
Yeah, well, I had been taking enzymes, and that is kind of the time when those ulcers that I had mentioned earlier started surfacing. And truly the most painful, speaking about emotional, the most painful, most difficult, heart-wrenching, breaking. It was the most horrible time of my life because I had ulcers up and down both of my left and right shins, and then I had this hand thing that opened up as well. And unlike giving birth, all the ladies out there understand how much pain happens when you give birth. You know that within 24 hours, that beautiful child is going to be out and yours and in your arms. I had no idea how long the pain was going to last. And, there was a progression where they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I didn't know how much worse could it get. I didn't know what the level was where it would start turning back toward healing. So really, really difficult time. My doctor had put me on at that point then a very strong, I had been on prednisone for quite a while at kind of a 10 to 12 milligram, maybe up to 15 milligrams for quite a while, like years at that point. But when this thing started erupting, I'll put it that way, they put me on dexamethasone, which is 5 times stronger than prednisone. And they put me on 16 milligrams of that.
Ay.
So super strong steroid. And again, it was potentially, I don't know, I'll never know. But in the moment, I thought that I needed it to keep this from tearing my whole body apart.
Mhm.
In hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have taken it because of that. Speaking of the side effects, I got a drug-induced cataracts at 40. So then I had to have eye surgery because, the drug had given me cataracts and nobody told me that steroids can create cataracts. I had no idea. And no, I didn't read the 0.03 font of the, that's 10
Yes.
pages of the 0.3 font that comes with the drug that says these are all the things you need to be aware of. So that was another reason that I was like, okay, Western medicine's approaches are just not working for me. And maybe they're working for many things, but not in this particular case. So I found online a couple of modalities and a couple of doctors that were healing people, specifically autoimmune diseases, by hypernourishing your body. And so, as hard as it was, and your audience is going to cringe when I tell you this, but for 6 months, from January until June, July, somewhere around there, I did nothing but eat 2 pounds or more of greens a day, plus
Mhm.
whatever fruits and veggies it took to stomach it to get it down. And I did it all in smoothies. There's no way I could have actually eaten that much salad. So I blended all up in my Vitamix and I drank it. And for 6 months, I tried to hyper nourish my body and give my body the nourishment that it hadn't had for 30 years. And it worked. It worked. So
Greens, the magic,
I
magic
know,
food,
I know.
phytonutrients,
Well,
vegetables. Imagine.
I, and a lot of this in this particular protocol with autoimmune disease was flaxseed, flax and chia, because trying to balance out the omega-6s and the omega-3s, we get a ton of omega-6 in our food, and fried foods and all that stuff has a ton of omega-6, but we don't get the
Yes.
balance of the omega-3. And those two omega-6s and omega-3s balance out to keep your immune system in check. But what you also want then is the switch that shuts it off, shut off the immune response. What I had is all the switches turning on and no switch to shut it off. And so the omega-3s that were coming from the flax and the chia seeds were huge. And I was doing half a cup or more a day of flax seeds.
Right.
I wasn't losing any weight, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you. Flax seeds are really dense, but I was healing, and that's what I had to do. I had to approach everything I ate no longer as food or
Mhm.
entertainment or fun. Everything I ate was medicine.
Absolutely. And that shift in perspective alone, if we could, all of us could embody that a little bit more and appreciate what we're putting into our bodies and see food as medicine and see the potential for it to be so healing, I believe that there would be a huge collective shift for many people who are interested in living happier and healthier. Omega-3 fatty acids are so important in the anti-inflammatory process. What we're looking for is about 3 to 1 omega-6s to omega-3s. Our population generally gets about 20 to 1. We begin feeding the inflammatory process because we're having so many of these omega-6s, and many of them, like you talked about, are these denatured fats, these fats that no longer even have the important healthy components. They've actually been changed.
Right. Exactly.
And so our bodies can't use them. Women in particular and young girls, for the hormonal process, so important to get those healthy fats.
Right. And for anyone listening out there, if you're having any kind of an autoimmune disease or autoimmune response that's surfacing and you want to try something like this, I can hear the echoes across the radio waves, if so to speak, the internet waves of, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that for 6 months. No way. Here's the deal. You can do it. You really can. And I'll tell you what, I did not enter into that journey alone. I planned for 3 months, if not more, maybe 4. I found 6 people who I trusted and believed would be really an encouraging support for me. I asked them to be on my team. I got people around me. I did all the preparations I needed. I cleaned out my house. I got my family on board. And this was a full court press to get this body healed. And so, yes, you can do it. You will need to enlist some help from your spouse and your family members, and you will need to take some drastic, massive action, but your life is worth it.
Yes.
And living, I wouldn't turn those 6 months. I wouldn't exchange those for anything for how I'm feeling now. No way. Traveling again with my family and being able to live with hope and excitement and energy and joy. And I wouldn't exchange any of that for a few pizza meals that I missed out on. And maybe the decision that I don't want to just flood my body with a bunch of genetically modified food. No, I mean, talk about your mindset shift. Do I want to just enjoy the food for fun, or do I want to enjoy the fellowship with my family and the things that they should be the fun? I shouldn't be so obsessed with the food that I can't say no to a pizza and say yes to a glass of green juice.
True. It does come back to the fundamental belief system of how you feel about yourself and how you value yourself and your health. And this act of self-care by feeding your body what it needs is really an act of self-love. When all kind of comes back to, I believe, definitely for me and others on the journey, is how much do we love ourselves and respect ourselves enough to say no to the things that don't serve our bodies, right? I haven't eaten gluten in years now. And that's not because gluten is bad for everyone, but for me, sure, do I miss an awesome bread or an amazing pastry or any of those things? Sure, I do. But I love my body enough to know that it's not worth the pain and discomfort for days on end for me and to have to go through that in order for me to have that.
Something on that I want to touch on, though, because when you're eating really cruddy food, especially food that's laden with vegetable and seed oils and sugar, which we can all just acknowledge out there in the world of restaurants and fast food, that is 95% of what they're serving. If it doesn't have even the bread that I get at the Whole Food store right down the street is full of sugar. So when you're on that kind of a diet, Laura, you don't like yourself.
Yes, it's true.
Care. You don't care what you put in yourself. Sugar is actually scientifically showing and proving for multiple studies, it creates depression. So if you are sad, if you are down, if you have no energy, if you don't want to do anything, if you don't have the motivation to treat yourself well, give yourself 3 days with no sugar. And I guarantee you're going to start having a little bit of encouragement, motivation, and joy to start making better choices. And that's all it takes. Action begets action. action precedes the feeling. You're never going to want to do it. You have to take action before you can feel like doing it. But if you're in that spiraling downward of, I just don't like myself, I just don't care, I'm going to order 2 pizzas now because you told me not to have it. I'm going to have 3 pizzas. You know, that is the food speaking. What do you think creates the chemical exchanges in our brains that creates joy and excitement and energy and happiness? It's the food, it's the fuel. And if you put bad fuel in your car doesn't run right. You put bad fuel in your body, you don't think right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. I mean, the food and mood connection is so important. And 80% of our serotonin is actually produced in our gut. And serotonin is that neurotransmitter that helps us be happier, helps us happier and experience joy and all of those things in our lives. And you're absolutely right. When we are not eating foods that are healthy, that give our bodies what it needs, well, we can't possibly secrete those neurotransmitters properly because our body is devoid of the nutrients required to make them. So there is a physiological impact for everything that we eat. And that's why when we're eating for our emotions, and that's a little bit what you also talked about there, I feel crappy, so I'm going to eat a crappy food, and then that crappy food is going to make me feel crappier, and then I'm feeling crappier about myself. And it's just
cycle, right?
It's perpetuating these cycles that are so unhealthy. And at some point we have to take that step back and go, okay, hang on. Like you said, I'm taking control of myself and my health. And this is how I choose to do something differently. Because what do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, exactly. What for anyone listening out there who thinks, well, tomorrow I'll have a little bit more energy. No, you won't. You won't have more energy tomorrow, and you won't have more desire to do it tomorrow. You won't. So do one little thing today to start moving yourself in the right direction, because the only thing that's going to change your tomorrow is the small little action you take today.
Yes. Love it, Lisa. Oh, so many great tidbits of information you have shared. Thank you. Thank you so much. In closing up, I would like to ask you, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but what would you say to somebody who is in health crisis right now, who is spinning and spiraling and, visiting MDs and not getting any answers? What could you tell them to maybe give them some advice and possibly direction on their journey?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, if you're in a health crisis, you created it. Just know that and just accept that. You are part of that. But the good news is, if you're part of the health crisis, you can be part of the health solution. So own it, own what you've done to this beautiful vessel that God gave you to live in. Own it and say, okay, I know I've done some things that aren't so good. I'm going to turn it around. If you are brand new to even understanding what, fruits, vegetables, protein, carbs, omega-6, omega-3s, if all of those things are just feeling a little overwhelming, first and foremost, I just want to encourage you, embrace the overwhelm a little bit for a little time. It's just like when you rode a bike or learned how to drive your car, it feels overwhelming for a little time. But as you start navigating, it's like when you're walking into the ocean, it feels kind of cold, but there's little by little, your body gets used to it and you get better and better. You get more and more comfortable with it. So let yourself be overwhelmed. That's okay. That's normal. You're learning new things. I will recommend a website. It's one of the guys that I've interviewed. He's just absolutely amazing. But the reason I recommend him is because the dozens of websites and dozens of research sources that I went to are basically all synthesized on his one website. He does a great job of pulling it all together. And his name is Chris Wark, W-A-R-K. His website is chrisbeatcancer.com, C-H-R-I-S. And Chris just has his is focused on cancer, but let's just tell you, just the truth is, whatever you're eating in a way to prevent cancer is also going to prevent other autoimmune diseases. So they're all connected. But he has a really nice way of explaining what's going on, where to start, how to get going on it, what kinds of small steps to start making. And if you don't want to go out there and just look, or you just want to say, okay, Lisa, what can I do today? Look at your sugar intake. That's a step one. If you're drinking sodas and I'm not getting much sugar intake. I'm just drinking diet soda. No, artificial sugars are also on that list. So look at how much sweetness you're getting into your diet from sugar and artificial sugar and those kinds of things and start eliminating them. If you have 3 cans of Coke a day, have 2. If you're able, have 0. It's the worst toxic stuff that you could possibly put in your body. Well, I guess there's a lot on that list, but start there. So check out Chris's site. Find somebody, my website's lisaroers.com. I've got a podcast called Sunshine Cafe. Podcast comes out every Saturday morning on all the places you would look for your podcast, as well as on YouTube. And I was going to say, I interview a lot of people, much like you do, Laura, of people who are health and wellness professionals or have gone through it, people who have gone through hard things and found modalities to help them out. So for your listeners, number one, do a self-assessment, find where they're at, find some ways to get some research, learning, start embracing the joy of learning. Embrace a little bit of overwhelm, but embrace the fact that you're learning and you're on a journey. You're not going to heal overnight. You didn't get sick overnight. You're not going to die tomorrow. You didn't just get sick yesterday. It's a healing process. So let yourself have the time to slowly heal. Find somebody to encourage you, find somebody to come alongside you, and find small steps that you can start making to improve your everyday living. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul, just 1 or 2 things, over the course of time, 1 or 2 things today, maybe 1 or 2 things next week. Start cleaning out the pantry, get some of the gross high sugar chips and all the different things that are in there that shouldn't be in there. I mean, if you stop and ask yourself, what am I eating that I shouldn't be eating? I guarantee you'll come up with 6 things. Oh, I shouldn't probably have eaten that. Well, next time, don't. Just do that. Just those small little things. Trust your gut, and you'll start to hear your body speak in a way that maybe you never knew your body was speaking. And those kinds of things are going to bring your health into a space maybe where you've never even known it to be, where you'll start feeling so good in a way that you never knew you could. And that's where you're going to be really living the best life you possibly can.
Yeah, Lisa, that's really wonderful and valuable information. Thank you so, so much for sharing. And if everyone understands that if we aren't uncomfortable, we're not growing, we can really begin to embrace change a little bit differently and not necessarily look at it as something that is bad or negative, and really look at it as an opportunity to grow and to live happier, healthier, different.
Exactly.
If we don't change the way we look at things, then things aren't going to change.
Right. And we have so much power, and you can be living a life you never expected to live in just a few months from now that is
Yes.
so much brighter, so much more joyful, so much energetic. I am walking and moving. I have just a couple of small symptoms that are still showing up, but everything else is gone. And I'm living a life. If I could just help your listeners feel the way that I feel right now, they would dive into it head first and full on, because nothing feels better. Nothing tastes better than being healthy feels.
Yeah, well, you are helping everyone right now who is going to tune in and share with others. And you continue to glow and are beautiful and have such a wonderful spirit and are so well spoken. So thank you for all of your vulnerability and sharing your story and all the wisdom and insight along the way. And I know that there are people out there who may not like what they're going to hear, but sometimes what we need to hear isn't necessarily in alignment with what we want to hear. Thank you for coming on today and for sharing. And I will make sure that I have those links on the podcast for people to check you out, check out the Sunshine Cafe podcast. Check out that link with Chris Wark as well, because that's all really, really valuable information. And you bring sunshine wherever you go. So why wouldn't
Oh.
anybody want more sunshine in their life?
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to be on your show, and thank you for having me. It's just a joy to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. And until next time, because I'm sure we'll speak again.
I look forward to it.
Me as well. Thanks for joining me today for Food Feels and Banana Peels. I hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in next week for a new guest, a new opportunity to learn and grow. It's an honor always to be a part of your journey. You can rate this podcast on Apple and Spotify, which will help it to be available to more people. You can now check out Food Feels and Banana Peels on YouTube too. Together we can inspire people to make healthy changes and advocate for themselves in a different way. Knowledge is power, and I hope you'll share yours. Be well, and until next time, so much love.